That is just a little bit of a taste of what you're in for tonight. Welcome to the Bonnie Kate Theater and welcome to the Thrill of Hope. We are so excited that you're here. My name is Tony and this is my friend Steven. We're storytellers and we are honored to have you here. You know, there are a lot of things that you could be doing this holiday season. There's so many different traditions and ways that you could spend your time, and so we consider it a privilege that you've chosen to spend part of your holiday season with us. Stephen, you know, there's a lot of traditions that come with Christmas time. What are some of your favorite holiday traditions?
I knew you were going to ask me this, and I was trying to think of a great one to start with, but I would say that my great-great-aunt, whenever I was growing up, we would visit her house, and she would have ham for the holidays, but she would also have stuff she called cranberry steam pudding. It wasn't pudding and it wasn't steamed, but it did have cranberries at least. And we would put some sauce on top. It was called hard sauce. It was just kind of this buttery sauce. And that was a tradition. We still make it today, even though she passed away, you know, many years ago, but she was 99, you know, when she passed away. And so this tradition of making this cranberry steam pudding has been around in our family for, you know, over 100 years. So what about you?
My favorite tradition is always going and finding a Christmas tree, cutting it down and decorating the Christmas tree. In fact, my family just did it last night. I grew up in a small little town out west called Las Vegas, Nevada. And growing up in Las Vegas, you don't have these places that you can go and drive out into the forest and have this great family moment where you go and cut down the Marr family Christmas tree. And so every year we had the same tradition. That we would pile into my parents' 1985 brown Ford Thunderbird and we would drive to the outskirts of town. We would get out and we would slug our way through the Home Depot parking lot to go and pick out a freshly cut 4 weeks ago and shipped across the country to North Carolina Christmas tree from Home Depot. Then we would go home and my mom would play Christmas carols on the piano. She'd make some homemade eggnog and we'd sing together as we decorated the tree.
There you go. You know, we took my daughter to get a tree a number of years ago, and we went to a place not far from here, up in the hills. It was one of those cut your own, you know, trees. And so my daughter walked up to this beautiful tree, and I said, "How much is that tree?" The guy said, $65. My daughter kind of goes like this. She goes, "Away in a manger, no." He said, "All right, $45." I was like, "Deal, you sold." So he sliced it down and we put it on the car like a dead deer and we drove home and we celebrated Christmas. So.
I wish that I could have taken your daughter with us last night. We paid $80 for a tree and that's after I talked him down from 100.
Well, see, you need to have someone sing. So, well, anyway, we're excited that you're here and we know you have traditions of your own and we hope that tonight some of these stories will touch you in a deep place and hopefully move you closer to the spirit of Christmas.
Yeah, holidays are always about traditions and they're definitely about stories.
When I was growing up and we would visit my great-great-aunt, you know, for the holidays, my uncle would always tell the kids a story. You know, he would take us into a corner of the room and he would get this look in his eye and he would say, "I'm going to tell you a story." And we were transported. We were no longer in the living room. We were on a flying carpet out over the desert or staring a grizzly down in Alaska or a possum, you know, in Carter County, Tennessee. But we were transported to another place, and so stories have always been an important part of both my holiday tradition and also just a big part of who I am. So let's jump into it and let's share some stories tonight.
Absolutely. We're glad that you all are here tonight and we're honored that you would choose to make us a part of your holiday, and maybe, just maybe, this will become a part of a new tradition for your holiday season. So we hope that you have a great time and enjoy the thrill of hope.
The story is told that many years ago in France, there was a juggler named Francois. And Francois would go to the fairs and the festivals, and he would entertain the crowds with his amazing juggling feats. 1 ball, that's easy. That's no problem. 2 balls back and forth, not a problem either. But 3 balls in the air, he would get them going. And then he would pick up and add 2 more. He would have 5 balls going at the same time. And his finale was not just 5 or 7, but to get 9 balls in the air. And then to catch them all before they hit the ground, and the last one landing into his cap. And so Francois would go around and he would perform, and everyone loved his show. But one day a monk came to watch him perform, and the monk said, "Francois, all you do is juggle. You should do something important with your life to serve the Lord." Well, Francois wanted to serve the Lord. Of course he wanted to serve the Lord, but the only thing he knew to do was juggle. And so finally, at the monk's convincing, he decided himself to go and join a monastery. And when he did, he set his juggling balls aside, and he took on a new name, Brother Louise. Now, Brother Louise was waiting for the Christmas program to come at the monastery, and some of the monks were practicing the piano and the organ to play for the program. One was writing a hymn, one was writing a sermon. But our friend, the brother, he did not have any gifts as far as writing or speaking or playing. The only thing he knew to do was to juggle. And so on the night before Christmas, he went into the sanctuary, into the chapel. And there before the statue of the Mary and Jesus, holding her, the baby Jesus, very stern and solid looking out, he began to juggle. He said, "This is the only thing I can do. This is the only thing I can offer. So here it is." And he started with 3 balls. And then he added 2 more. And finally, he was juggling 7 balls in front of the statue of the Christ child. And as he was juggling, Brother Mark, the one who'd first met him at the fair, came by and saw what was happening. He was aghast. He said, "He's desecrating the holy chapel. We should get the abbot." So they called the abbot down, and now word whispered all throughout the monastery of what was happening. And brothers came, and they all began to watch as he finally finished up with the 9 balls, caught them in his hat, and bowed down before Mary and Jesus. And Brother Mark cleared his throat. Everyone turned and looked, and there was the abbot standing there. And he said, Brother Mark said, "What should we do? What are we to do with him tonight?" The abbot looked past him to the baby Jesus, and he could see that instead of a stern look on his face, there was a twinkle in his eye, and he was smiling. The statue was smiling. And the abbot said, "We will do nothing except for thank God for the gift that Francois has given to Christ the King."
Stephen, that coincidentally reminds me of a story that also takes place in France and also takes place a long, long time ago. January of 1847 was an exciting year. Francois had just graduated from seminary and he had his first appointment at a church. He was assigned to a small little Catholic church, perfect for someone new to the priesthood. The church was about 2 hours away from Paris. And it was a small little village that the church was needing some revitalization. And so they thought that this was a perfect place for a young, energetic, enthusiastic new priest fresh out of seminary. But the first several months of his first placement weren't going so well. Francois was having a hard time connecting with people in his parish. He would try going out into the community and meeting as many people as he could, and he worked really hard on his Sunday sermons, but attendance was declining. Offerings were down, and, well, he was sure that at the end of the year he wasn't going to get a very good review or report. So he knew that he needed to do something. He needed to do something big to boost the excitement in the community and get some life and some energy back into his small little Catholic church. So he had an idea. You see, in the Catholic Church, in almost every church, one of the biggest services of the year is Christmas Eve. And in this church, it was no different. Francois had heard stories about Christmas Eve Mass at this small little church. And so he knew that this was his perfect opportunity. He wrote the best message that he had ever written. And as he was sitting just a few months away, he knew that something was missing from the service if it was going to truly put it over the top, if it was going to save his job and quite possibly even his career. And he had an idea. His idea was the grand finale of the service. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there could be a Christmas poem? Problem was, he wasn't a poet. He wasn't much of an artist in any way, but he knew a poet. One of his good friends, the local commissioner of wines, was known for his wines, but more importantly, he was known for his poetry. So he called his friend and he asked him if they could meet for lunch one day at the town bistro. His friend was a little concerned why Francois was contacting him to have lunch in the middle of the week. When he sat down and he heard the story of the declining attendance, the declining offerings, and the need for something big to happen, he just kind of shook his head and shrugged his shoulders. And then came the ask. He said, "You're a great poet. I've read many of your things and I really admire your work. I was wondering if you would be so willing to honor me and our parish by writing a poem that will be recited on Christmas Eve Mass." Now the commissioner was a little taken aback, because while he was known for his poetry and known for his taste in wine, he was not known for his church attendance. Although he grew up Catholic and even went to Catholic primary school, he hadn't stepped foot in the doors of this church, much less any church, for years. But he could see that his friend was in a bind, and wanting to help him out in his time of need, he reluctantly agreed to write a poem. The problem was he was leaving that afternoon to spend the next 2 weeks in Paris for work. He wouldn't be back until the day before Christmas Eve. Francois assured him that that wouldn't be a problem as long as everything was prepared and ready for Christmas Eve service. So the commissioner went back to his loft apartment. He packed some things and he dug through a drawer and pulled out his old Bible that he hadn't looked at in who knows how long. He stuffed everything into a duffel bag and went out to meet the horse-drawn carriage that would take him on the 2-hour journey to the city. As the carriage made its way down the cobblestone streets, he began to think and reflect on his own childhood. Most of the memories of his time in the church were dark. But his memories of Christmas Eve, sitting with his family, his mom, his dad, his brothers and his sisters in the small little church, holding candles and hearing the story of the Nativity from the pulpit, brought back many fond memories. He reached into that duffel and pulled out that old Bible and opened up to Luke chapter 2. He read words that he hadn't read and, well, he couldn't remember the last time. He pulled an old notepad and a pen out and he began to write. 2 hours later, when he arrived at his hotel in Paris, it was complete. He was so moved by what he wrote that he was holding back tears. He got all settled into his hotel room and began to recite over and over the words of the poem. And then he had the realization that what he had written was not a poem at all. It was a song. The only problem was he wasn't a musician. But he knew a great composer who lived there in the city. So he quickly summoned for him to meet him for dinner. He sat down with his friend over dinner and he explained the situation to him. His friend laughed because his friend was not a believer. In fact, his friend was a Jew. He said, just read what I wrote. And he slid his notebook across the little bistro table. His Jewish friend, the composer, began to read, and before he could even finish, his eyes were filled with tears. He was so moved by the words on the sheet of paper that he agreed to compose the accompanying music. And he said he would have it done within the week. 2 days later, he summoned for his friend, the commissioner, again and said, "You've got to come to my apartment and hear what I have done." And there, in a small apartment in Paris, France, in 1847, he played for him the music that he had wrote to the words of his poem. Well, the commissioner canceled the rest of his trip, hurried back home because he was so excited to present it to his friend, the priest. The priest read the words and heard the song, and he was immediately moved and knew that he had something huge. And on Christmas Eve, 1847, in a small little village in a tiny little town, 2 hours outside of Paris, a small Catholic church on a snowy evening with moon breaking through the clouds was packed outside of the doors. And by candlelight, for the very first time, these words were sung. And oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. The thrill of hope, a weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angel voices, oh, night divine, oh, night when Christ was born.
So as an author and a storyteller, I get to travel around and speak at different events. And sometimes people will say strange things to you at the events if they think you're famous. There was this lady came up to me one time and she goes, "Oh, you are my biggest fan." And I was like, okay. She said, no, you are my biggest fan. And I was like, well, then I'm glad to finally meet you. I didn't know what else to tell her. There was one lady came up to me one time and she goes, "Has anyone ever told you how handsome you are?" And I was like, no. And she said, "There's a reason for that." Now, I didn't know what to think. I was at this other event, and it was at the Christmas season. They were giving away door prizes at this program. And so before I got up to speak, they were giving away, announcing these door prizes. It was a Baptist conference, and I was sitting in the back near this table with these guys, and one of the gifts was a body wrap. And they said, "This body wrap is going to go to this, door prize to this number." And I'm sitting there, and the guy next to me turns to the guy beside me and goes, "What is a body wrap?" The other guy says, "I don't know, but Baptists don't do it." So it's fun to travel around and to speak, and sometimes it calls me to be away from home. And so when my daughters were younger, I'll tell you a little bit about my daughters here. I have 3 daughters and 1 wife, and so my daughters are, now they're older, they're grown now. 2 are married and 1 is in college, but when the oldest one was just 4 years old, she learned to read. And when she was 6 years old, she read the Chronicles of Narnia by herself. And I remember sometimes when kids are little, you'll spell stuff so they don't know what you're talking about. Well, it never worked with my daughter. My wife's name is Liesel, by the way. That's from The Sound of Music, a very great holiday, Christmas movie and stuff. But the only unfortunate part about that was whenever we were going out, I wanted to write a romantic poetry, but there are not a lot of romantic words that rhyme with Liesel. It's like, "To my dearest Liesel, you're cuter than a weasel." It's just not good. "You smell better than diesel." It's not good material. You just don't want to go there. And so I'd say to Liesel, "I'm going to the REFRIGERATOR to get a COKE." Okay, that was refrigerator and Coke. And so my daughter, she'd be like, 4 years old. She'd say, "Dad, could you grab one for me while you're there?" And she'd walk off spelling the dictionary. Then my middle daughter is, she's about 24 right now, expecting a little baby coming soon in February. So that's exciting. And, but when she was little, I would be playing the game that fathers play called beach whale after work in the living room. And it's where we lay on our stomach and we are beach whales. So she would come jump into my back, boing, 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 boing. I said, don't jump on me, I am your dad. She goes, you're not my dad, you're my pillow, boing, boing, boing. I said, don't jump on me, I am the dad. She looks down, she goes, my pillow's talking. Hello, talking pillow, boing, boing, boing. And my youngest daughter, who's in college right now, when she was 6 months old, she would beat herself in the face with anything she could get her hands on, including the cat. When she turned 18 months old, she would dig through the garbage can, pull out used Q-tips, and chew on them. And when she turned 3 years old, she would take all of her clothes off, and we would have company come to the house, and she would run throughout the house screaming, I'm naked, I'm naked. So that's pretty much my family right there. I remember saying to my wife, great, I've managed to raise kid genius, kid comic, and a 4-year-old suicidal Q-tip eating stripper. Sign me up to teach the next parenting seminar. I'll give them something to say, you know. And so, but traveling around, sometimes I would come back home when my daughters were younger, and I would not always, well, I'll just put it this way. Sometimes I would rush out to go to exercise or play basketball with some of my friends. I remember when my oldest daughter, Trinity, she was maybe 5 years old, and I'd been gone for a couple of days, and I came back and I looked at the clock. It was just enough time to tuck her in bed quickly and then go play basketball with my buddies. And so I went into the room and I said, good night, sweetheart, I love you, God bless you. And she said, Daddy, can you tell me a story? And so I said, all right. So I told her a quick story. I made up a quick story. And then I said, okay, I'll see you tomorrow, good night. And she said, Daddy, it's dark. I said, I'll open the door a little bit. And so I opened the door a little bit, and I was ready to leave. And she said, Daddy. By now, I was frustrated. I was exasperated. Like, what? She goes, can you smile at me? I was like, oh, man. So I walked over and sat beside her, took her hand, little hand in mine. I smiled at her, and it was only a couple of moments before she fell asleep. She just didn't want to be left alone in the dark. She just wanted her daddy to look down and smile at her. She just wanted the light to come in to where she was. And so after 400 years of waiting for the light to come, God took Israel's hand and he whispered that he was going to come down into to a baby child, to a small baby, and no more would they have to be alone in the darkness.
Long lay the world in sin and ever pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. The thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn.
So one day my fiance came up to me and she told me she was expecting a child. And one thing I knew for certain, it wasn't mine.
No one ever grows up with hopes and dreams, aspirations of being a shepherd. Shepherds are disgraced from society. They're the outcasts of the community.
She was a teenage girl, and if people in our community found out that she was expecting and wasn't married, she would be an outcast. I honestly didn't know what to do. I was afraid for myself, but also even more afraid for her. I had no idea how to respond.
As a shepherd, you're kicked out of the city. You live on the outskirts of town, up on the hillside. The only friends that you have are other shepherds and, well, the sheep that you're entrusted with their care. You smell like a sheep, and, well, before long, you start to talk to sheep.
So one night, an angel appeared to me in a dream. The angel assured me that this baby was from God, that I should not cut off the engagement with my fiancée, that I should respect her, care for her, and care for this little baby.
The good thing about being an outcast from society, living out on the hills outside of the city, is that you know everything going on in the town below.
The word came that we should return to our ancestral homes for a big census. And so, even though she was great with child, I had to take her on a journey from where we lived down to Bethlehem.
Something was going on. Something big. Our small little town of Bethlehem that normally has a population of about 5,000 people had busted its seams, and now there were 25,000 people that were flooding its streets. It was a party atmosphere that we could see from clear up on high. Restaurants had people spilling out of them. The streets were packed, and there wasn't a hotel room to be had for 3 towns over.
We didn't know what to do. There wasn't anywhere we could stay. Finally, the only thing I could do was take her to the outskirts of the city, and there in the outskirts we found a stable where we could at least sleep for the night. And while we were in the stable, surrounded by sheep, that's when it happened.
I was surrounded by my sheep when I heard a sound. It sounded like a choir was singing, but that was impossible because as much as was going on in the city below, the sound never traveled that far up the hill. I turned around to see what was going on, and I was blinded by a light that was right in front of me. I was afraid.
I was afraid. Here she was. She had her baby, a little boy that I knew I was to name Jesus, which meant the one who saves, or Savior. But I didn't know who was going to save us.
The angel spoke. First thing he said was, "Don't be afraid." Go figure. And then he said, "I bring you good news of great joy. For today in that town right below you in Bethlehem, a Savior has been born. Christ the Lord. And you're to go. You're the invited guest to go and see this King of Kings and this Lord of Lords, so that you know where you're going. You'll find him laying in a manger, a feeding trough, like your sheep's."
So Mary took and she wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger, feed box for animals, whereas there was nowhere else to put him. I was scared. We were alone. I didn't know how to provide for them. And I wished, since I was a carpenter, that I could make a crib or a cradle for our child.
We quickly gathered everything. We put the sheep into their pens and we began to run down the mountainside. We got to the outline of town, made our way along the cobblestone streets, through the candlelit windows of all the city streets and shops. We fought our way through the crowds to the outskirts where the crowds diminished. And there, just as the angel had said, we saw him.
These shepherds showed up, and they knelt down, and I knelt with them. And we bowed on our knees before the child, before the boy.
As a shepherd, you're always the last to know. And you're always the last to show. So we knew that this time would be no different. The child had probably been born weeks before. We would come, we would pay our respects, and we would go back to the hills. But I was shocked to see that when we got there, we weren't the last to know. In fact, we were the first. We were the invited guests. I saw the child and his mother, and the only thing that I knew to do was fall on my knees
and worship him.
So fall on your knees. Oh, hear the angel voices. Oh, night divine. Oh, night when Christ was born. Oh, night divine, oh, night
So I grew up in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin is famous for a few things: cheese, farmers, cows. I wasn't a big fan of cows, farmers, and cheese, so I didn't really fit in so well in Wisconsin. I still remember that there was this road sign as you came over from Illinois, driving up into Wisconsin, where it said, "Come up to Wisconsin and smell our dairy air." I'm thinking, really? You're going to lead with that? That's what you have to work with here? And it was so cold that I was afraid, I was terrified that I would freeze to death on the way to the mailbox in the morning. And it was so cold sometimes that if you spit, it would freeze before it hit the ground. Sometimes if you walked outside and your hair was wet, you would have hair sickles sticking out of your head. If your nose was running, these snotsicles would freeze on your face, and you'd go back inside and they would melt and you would be drinking snotsicles. You'd have, coming out of your eyes, you'd have icicles. And so it was not something that I wanted to travel. I wanted to leave. I wanted freedom of the open road. I was 16 years old, and I thought, yes, if only I can get my license, then I can experience the freedom, and I can, experience my own path for a change. And so there was a problem, though. Actually, with a subset of other problems. I did not have a car, did not have insurance, did not have money to buy a car, and did not have a license. And so my dad took me out to the mall parking lot, and there, after just a few short years driving around, he taught me to drive. And I took my driver's test, and I passed that sucker on the second try. I walked down the aisle, and this lady took my photograph, my pimply face, and 16-year-old, and she wrote on it, I signed it, and she put Wisconsin State Operator's License, stamped it. I held it up. I said, "This is my passport to freedom. This is my ticket to adventure. I own the future." Stuck in my pocket, went home. I asked my dad if I could borrow the car. For 2 weeks, he couldn't say no fast enough. And finally, I said, "Dad, look, I've got my brand new license. I've got to use it somehow." He said, "All right, let me speak to your mother." He went into the other room, and I could hear Mom and Dad talking for a minute until finally he invited me in, and he pulled out the car keys, and he held them up in front of me like this. And he said, "Your mother and I have been talking about it, and we feel like it's time that you had a little bit more responsibility." And he's holding them in front of me. I said, "Yes, Master. You are getting very responsible, yes." He said, "All right, where do you want to go?" I said, "Well, I want to go to Whitewater." It was a 45-minute drive away. I figured I'd start small and work my way up, to Hawaii eventually. But it was 45 minutes away, and they were the only place in the area that had an open gym late enough at night that would close at midnight, so I could leave, go play for 2 hours, and then come home. Because I loved basketball. And my dad said, "All right, listen. If you're going to Whitewater, you're going to be driving through the middle of the country, and you're going to come to this stop sign. It's in the middle of nowhere. You wouldn't expect a stop sign to be there. When you drive, don't miss that stop." People all the time are missing that stop sign. "Don't miss that stop sign." I'm like, "Dad, I'm 16. Finally, he handed me the keys, and I walked out to the car, brought my basketball along with me. Now, when they teach you to drive, they teach you, at least when I learned to drive, 9 o'clock and 2 o'clock with your hands. Then you got to check your seat belt, your side view, speedometer, rear view. Seat belt, side view, speedometer, rear view. Seat belt, all the while not taking your eyes off the road. But about 2 weeks after you get your license, you're like one finger on the wheel, one arm out the window. It's like, woo! Turn up the volume, reach over, kiss your date. Didn't have a date, just a basketball, no thanks. And so I was like, we're going to drive to Whitewater. So I'm listening to some music, kind of got it craned, arm out the window, one finger on the wheel. I'm driving along, and I come to that stop sign, no problem. I stopped, looked left, looked right, left again, no problem, no nothing. I drove on to the gym. Now, when I got to the gym, I started to play basketball. We were playing 3-on-3, and the problem was that there was some girls watching us. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but when a guy sees a girl something happens to him. A psychologically, scientifically proven fact comes into play. When a guy sees a girl that he likes, he begins to act stupid. Okay. And so while we were playing, these girls are watching us, and I mean, you can test a bunch of guys. If you ever see a bunch of guys playing basketball, ladies out here who are listening, just kind of walk up, do that thing where you kind of turn your leg kind of on the hip like this, kind of look at the boy. He'll try to dunk if he can't jump, even if he can't jump over a telephone book. Okay? Stupid is as stupid does. And so we were playing, kind of trying to, show off for these girls and playing. I lost track of the time. Now my father had told me that I needed to be back by midnight. So it was a 45-minute drive. And finally when I looked at the clock and I saw it was 11:20, I thought I better be getting going. Now, I thought to myself, okay, if it's a 55-mile-per-hour speed limit, and there's a 20-mile-per-hour headwind, you need to be going 75 miles per hour just to break even at 55. And then plus they usually give you like 6 miles over, so you could actually be going 81 and not speeding. This is physics, folks. This is physics 101. And so I thought, no, I'm not going to speed, nothing. And so I left the gym. Now, it isn't my fault. It was not my fault that there was a fog that settled into the valley between Whitewater and that stop sign. But as I was driving, one arm out the window, one finger on the wheel, listening to some music, all of a sudden I heard this sound like, brrr. I thought it was like this grinding sound, the bass of the song. I thought, oh, cool, turn it up. Can I turn it up? I heard it again. I was like, awesome, cool. I didn't realize it was those rumble strips that you drive over that show you that a stop sign is coming. I didn't realize that until I saw the stop sign flash past the car into the rearview mirror. I slammed on the brakes in the middle of the intersection. Look left, look right, left again. Nothing, no problem, good. I glanced up in the rearview mirror out of instinct. Seatbelt, rear. But as I looked up there, I could see a set of headlights behind me, just barely visible through the fog. And I thought, wouldn't it be hilarious? I mean, wouldn't it be ironic? I mean, wouldn't it be funny if that was a cop car? I mean, if that was... I couldn't believe it. I pulled over to the side. This cop comes out. Now, if I tell you the word Bubba, whatever you think of with the word Bubba, that was this cop right here. So Bubba Cop walked up to me and he kind of knocked on the window with one, knuckle. I rolled it down. This is back in the days when you actually rolled down the windows. I rolled it down. Hello. Son, can I see your license, please? Right. My license, please. I know I've got it. Handed it over. I can almost hear him thinking, feels pretty new. As he stood there, he said, son, did you see that stop sign back there? You mean the one right back there? Yes, did you see that stop sign just back there? Right. Do you mean, did I see it a little while ago or like a couple of hours ago coming from the other direction? Because I distinctly remembered, did you see that stop sign back there just a little while ago? Right. Do you mean before or after it was in the rear view mirror? Son, I'm going to have to give you a ticket. It's like, you don't have to. I'll be glad to forgive you if you decide that you... But by then he was gone. Back to his car. And I'm thinking, oh no, I'm dead meat. I looked at the time and the time started to pass. I felt like 14 hours were passing, but it was almost an hour. I don't know why it took him so long to write my name down on a sheet of paper. But finally he came back. He said, drive safely now. He gave me this ticket. It was for $6 zillion more than I had at that time in my life. I set it down and I was like, all right, just get home and deal with things then. I looked at the clock. It was 1:10 a.m. So I'm driving home, and as I'm coming up to the house, I can see that all the lights are out in the house. I'm thinking, yes, I'm home free. I got out of the car, kind of, instead of using the electric garage door opener, just did it by hand. Put the car in a neutral, pushed that baby into the garage. Closed the garage door on my foot so that it wouldn't rattle. Then grabbed all my gear, took my basketball shoes off so they wouldn't squeak in the kitchen. wore them around my neck, carrying everything. And I'm walking through the kitchen. All I have to do is get through the dining room to my bedroom, and I'm home free. I'm thinking, I own the future. But as I'm halfway through the dining room, all of a sudden I hear this voice say, Steve, ah! I looked over. It's my dad sitting there in the dark, staring at me with his hands folded in front of him. It's like, Dad, how you doing? Oh, man, it's late. I better be getting to bed. So I started taking 2 steps, and he said, stop right there. I thought, I'm a dead man. I turned and looked, and my dad said, you know what time it is? I said, it's almost tomorrow. He said, it is tomorrow. Oh. What happened? Well, you see, I was coming, and there was the stop sign there in the middle of nowhere. You wouldn't expect the stop sign to be there. And then, so I hit the brakes, and we got to get those brakes checked out. I mean, I didn't stop, and I got a ticket. Let me see it. I handed it over in the darkness, and he sat there somehow looking at it. He could see from the light just coming in the windows. He said, this is like $6 zillion more than you have in this time. It's like, I know. Then he didn't say anything. I waited. I could hear the grandfather clock tick, tock, tick. My dad didn't move. After a little while, I'm thinking maybe he fell asleep. And as I'm taking another step toward the bedroom, he said, all right, I'll tell you what, I'll pay it off for you. I said, I'll pay it back. I mean, I promise. He said, all right. Good night. I said, good night, Dad. As he went into the other room, I couldn't sleep that night. It wasn't so much that I'd broken the law or that I'd gotten a ticket that really kept me awake. It was that I'd let down my dad. And so this was in November. And by the end of the week, I paid him what I could out of my money, but I didn't have a whole lot of money. And as the days passed toward December, I paid him a little bit more, but I still had way too much to pay than the money that I had in the bank. And so finally it came to be Christmas at our house. And at Christmas at our house, we would go to the church service Christmas Eve and then come out and open the presents that night. And so we came home, and at the service, I wasn't really thinking about the Christmas story so much. I mean, I knew the story, I'd heard the story. I don't know that it had ever really settled in. This baby is born, baby Jesus, he grows up, he dies, and but pulling it all together, it didn't really make sense to me. And so we came home from church that night, and we opened our presents, and finally we were cleaning up, and underneath the tree I found a card with my name on it. And I thought, well, maybe this is some money from Grandma or something. I can use it to help pay off what I owe my dad. So I ripped it open, simple card, and the inside it just said, Merry Christmas. Opened it, said, Love, Dad. But in the inside of the card was my ticket. And my dad, in bold red magic marker, had written across it, paid in full. See, my dad paid off the debt of what I owed because I couldn't do it on my own. And he did it because he loved me. He did it because, well, when you love someone that much, you don't really have a choice. And so that night, the Christmas story took on new meaning for me. I began to realize for the first time that thrill of hope. Oh night divine, oh night divine.
The song was an instant hit. And over the course of the next several years and decades, it spread throughout France and all throughout Europe. It spread throughout the borders of Europe and all throughout denominations. But about 20 years after the song had made its debut on Christmas Eve in that small little French village, 1847, when the poet decided he was going to completely leave the Catholic Church and join the socialist movement, and the Catholic Church found out that the composer wasn't even a believer, he was a Jew, they called the song a disgrace, banned it from ever being sung again, citing that it completely lacked the Christmas spirit. But you know how things go. It didn't stop the song from spreading even further. Underground churches continued to sing it, and church denominations outside the Catholic Church continued until it spread like wildfire. Almost 30 years after that night, France found itself in a very dire situation. They were in war at the hands of the Germans in the Franco-Prussian War. And in 1871, they were facing defeat. It was Christmas Eve, 1871. The battle was at its peak in France. Well, let's just say things weren't looking good. In the middle of a battlefield, there on the coast of France, a young French soldier was down in a hole. Some people say that maybe it was because he was missing home. Some people say that maybe it was because he knew that they were about to lose, and the chances of him surviving this evening were slim to none as the German army was pressing closer and closer and closer. With guns and cannons going off all around, he laid down his rifle, stood up, and began to march across the battlefield. People began to stop and look at this insane Frenchman who was illuminated by nothing but the moonlight. And there, bare, no arms, he stood in the middle of the battlefield and he began to sing, "O holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth." From a bunker across the field, a young German soldier stood up and began to sing the second verse. Within moments, men and women on both sides were standing and singing and crowding into the battlefield. And on Christmas Eve, 1871, generals from both the French and the German army agreed to a ceasefire for that evening only in honor of that holy night because of that French soldier. Meanwhile, several thousand miles away across the sea in America, a young seminary student was studying for his final thesis. He was studying old hymns from Europe, and he came across the disgraced and banned Christmas song. He was taken aback by the words, and while the United States, his own country, was in the middle of a bitter civil war, the words struck a chord with him, especially the third and fourth verses. So he took it upon himself to translate the song from French into English. And on Christmas Eve, 1871, as the French and Germans were singing the song in the middle of the battlefield, thousands of miles away in a small church in Massachusetts, the young seminary student led in the singing. And truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. And chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. Sweet hymns of joy in grateful chorus raise we, let all within us praise his holy name. Christ is the Lord. Oh, praise his name forever. His power and glory ever more proclaim.
You know, Tony, I love how you're able to look at the story and the song and weave them all together. You know, I was thinking of some of the songs that we sing for Christmas, and I know that you have some very reverent songs that aren't shared as often at Christmas time. And I was wondering if you could maybe share one or two of those with everyone here, and very reverent kind of moment here in this program tonight.
Yeah, I'm primarily a storyteller, but I also dabble a little bit in songwriting and singing and songwriting. And being someone who loves Christmas so much, I decided that I wanted to write some songs that celebrated the traditions that I love in Christmas.
Yeah.
And so if it's okay, I'd like to share a couple of those with you guys. This one, I grew up every Christmas. We had these 2 VHS tapes that were filled with Christmas programs. Alvin and the Chipmunks and the Golden Echo Harmonica. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Frosty the Snowman, my favorite, Charlie Brown Christmas. I love these stories. A Christmas Story where Ralphie shoots his eye out with the BB gun. I love these stories, and so I thought that maybe someone should write a song about what would happen if everything with those characters went wrong. Chipmunks roasting on an open fire. Rudolph's got a runny nose. Frosty's melted and is there in a pile, and Santa's broke down on the road. Snoopy's got a cold. Charlie Brown finally kicked the ball, but missed the winning field goal. All the Who's down in Whoville will sing, it must be the worst Christmas of all. They know that Ralphie's gonna play. He'll shoot his eye out once again on Christmas Day. It's sad that Bud, he lost his date, and the Polar Express was finally late. So to all those who may be home alone, at least you're not with the Griswolds. Let's join with the Who's down in Whoville and sing the worst Christmas of all. Let's join with the Who's down in Whoville and sing the worst Christmas of all. Thank you, thank you.
Very touching.
One of the things that is a tradition in Christmas is Christmas shopping. And because if we really break it all down, Christmas is really about presents. And so I wrote this little song to kind of celebrate the holiday season and the joy of shopping at Christmas time. Just bring your Amex, Visa, MasterCard, Discover today. We'll go in debt forever, buying gifts everybody will hate. Just spend your whole life savings, I'm sure everything will be fine. Good, charge it up for Christmas and interest doesn't start till July. Charge it up, charge it up, charge it up, let's go. This line is too slow. What is a debt to income ratio? Wrap it up, wrap it up, wrap it up, I've spent 6 months of my rent. Who knew that my gifts this year would be next year's white elephant? Who knew that my gifts this year would be next year's white elephant? Let's go to Walmart, Penny's, Navy, and Target tonight. I'm parking lot so crowded that I'm sure I'm gonna end in a fight. Don't look at how much I spent, just look at how much I saved. I think that maybe Black Friday deserves its own holiday. I think that maybe Black Friday deserves its own holiday. I think that maybe Black Friday deserves its own holiday. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Black Friday deserves its own holiday. I have one more, Stephen, that I'm really excited to share with you. This is one of my favorite songs, celebrating one of my favorite Christmas traditions, which of course is eating. If you know this one, just sing along with me. Come, they told me, get plum, 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 plum. There's lots of things to eat. Get plum, 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 plum. There is no gluttony. Get plum, 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 plum. Gravy on everything. Get plum, 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 plum. Plum, 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 plum. Plum, 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 plum. We'll pray before we dine. Pum, 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 pum. And we'll be just fine. And I'll have a turkey thigh. Pum, 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 pum. Please pass the pumpkin pie. Pum, 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 pum. Candied yams, deviled eggs, get plum, 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 plum. I think I need Rolaids, get plum, 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 plum. Plum, 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 plum. Plum, 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 plum. Is fat a handicap? Plum, 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 plum. I need a nap. I need a nap. I need a nap.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful tune. Stephen, you know one. You have one that you especially like, don't you?
There is a traditional song that we sing at Christmas time with my family and my loved ones, of course. It's called Ron the Toad. Some of you may know this one. It's a very reverent song, and it's in honor of our friend Ron the Toad. The words are quite simple. They go, "Oh Ron the Toad, oh Ron the Toad, why did you hop across the road?" I think you'll know the tune. You can join us with this tune. It's a very popular tune, and I'll do the verses. You can just do the chorus together.
That works for me. Oh, Ron the Toad, oh, Ron the Toad, why did you try and cross the road? Oh, Ron the Toad, oh, Ron the Toad, why did you try and cross the road? Your turn.
Oh, Ron the Toad, you were my friend. One hop, one honk, it was the end.
Oh, Ron the Toad, oh, Ron the Toad, why did you try and cross the road?
Oh, Ron the Oh, Ron the Toad, you were so brown, but now you're stretched upon the ground.
Oh, Ron the Toad, oh, Ron the Toad, why did you try and cross the road?
Oh, Ron the Toad, I'm missing you, because you're now just highway goo.
Oh, Ron the Toad, oh, Ron the Toad, why did you try and cross the road?
You used to hop and jump about, but now your guts are spilling out.
Oh, run the toad, oh, run the toad. Why did you try and cross the road?
You were my friend, and now you're dead. Your back is marked with tired tread.
Oh, run the toad, oh, run the toad. Why did you try and cross the road?
Poor old Ron, we loved you so. It's hard to see you go, but it's another Christmas tradition to sing your song.
Everybody, one more time. Oh, run the toad, oh, run the toad. Why did you try and cross the road? Oh, run the toad, oh, run the toad. Why did you try and cross the road? It's going to be a sad Christmas without you.
So the story is told that long ago there were 3 trees. And although they were small trees, they had big dreams. The first tree, from where it grew, could look down the mountainside to the village at the base of the mountain, and there it watched as people would enter and leave, trading their goods for boxes and chests and crates of gold and silver. And the first tree said, when I grow up and I get cut down, I want to be a treasure chest. I want to hold the greatest treasures in the world. That's what I want to be when I grow up, said the first tree. Well, the second tree, from where it grew, could look down the mountainside and saw as people would trade their goods for boxes and chests of gold. But instead, the third tree looked beyond and could see the sea on the horizon. And the second tree said, when I grow up and I get cut down, I want to be turned into a great sailing ship. I want to sail from sea to sea and from shore to shore. That's what I want to be when I grow up. So the second tree dreamed its dream. Well, the third tree, from where it grew, could see the village but wasn't interested in holding treasure. It could see the sea but wasn't interested in pursuing adventure. Instead, the third tree said, when I grow up, I never want to be cut down. I want to grow to be the tallest tree in the world. That's what I want to be when I grow up. And so the third tree dreamed its dream. The years went by, and the trees grew tall and strong. Their roots went deep into the ground, and one day 3 woodcutters left the village at the base of the mountain and dragged their heavy axes up the mountainside to where the 3 trees grew. The first woodcutter approached the first tree, looked it up and down, and said, ah, yes, this tree will do perfect for what I want. And as he raised his heavy axe and he cut down the first tree was thinking, I'm going to hold the greatest treasures in the world. The second woodcutter approached the second tree, looked it up and down, and said, ah, this tree will do perfect for what I want. And as he raised his heavy axe and cut down the second tree was thinking, going to be a great sailing ship. I'll sail from sea to sea and from shore to shore. The third woodcutter approached the third tree, but he didn't look it up and down. He just stared at the roots and he said, any old tree will do for what I want. And with that he raised his heavy axe, and if trees could cry, there would have been tears in the third tree's leaves as it trembled and watched as he raised the axe and he cut down the third tree. The third tree fell, silent and dreamless, to the forest floor. Well, the 3 woodcutters dragged their trees down the mountainside to the village. And the first tree was cut and shaped and fashioned and formed not into a great treasure chest, but instead into a simple little feed box for animals. The second tree wasn't fashioned and formed into a great sailing ship, but instead into a simple little fishing boat that would never leave the small lake at the base of the mountain where the 3 trees had dreamed their dream. The third tree was cut into long timbers and piled up with 100 other trees like itself. But the third tree didn't care anymore, because the third tree had stopped dreaming its dream. And the years passed, and one day a young man and a young woman came into the stable where the first tree was being used as a feed box, and having nowhere else to set the child, they laid him into the first tree. As the first tree looked out at what was happening and looked at who it was holding, the first tree realized that it really was holding the greatest treasure in the world. As the years passed, the second tree was now old and it was rotting in places. And as a storm blew up, the second tree thought for certain that it would be smashed to pieces on the waves. But instead, a man who'd been sleeping on the second tree awoke. He stepped to the deck of the second tree, raised his hand, said one word, and the waves were like glass. The sea was silent. The wind stopped blowing. The second tree realized that it was part of an adventure, the greatest adventure could ever have known. The third tree was taken from its pile and nailed into the shape of a cross. A man was made to carry it outside of the village, and there on a small hill at the base of the mountain where the three trees had dreamed their dreams, they took the man and they nailed him to the cross. The third tree felt terrible to be used for such a purpose, but after they tore his body down, the third tree was left there. That day and the next, and on the morning of the third day, the third tree realized something was different. It had its hope back again. It realized who had been hanging from its branches, and the third tree also realized that from that day on, whenever anyone saw that third tree, or even just a picture of the third tree, they would think of God Himself. And that thought filled the third tree with more joy than the dream of being the tallest tree in the world ever had.
We all have these hopes and dreams. That life is going to turn out to be this wonderful adventure, but so oftentimes something happens. Through the years, our dreams and our hopes, they get derailed by life and by reality. And what we thought was our plan soon is just a figment of our imagination or some silly childhood fantasy. This holiday season, maybe some of you are thinking back on those dreams, those hopes that you had. And maybe for some of you this holiday season, you're so filled with hope and joy that you can't wait to celebrate. And others, you're just hoping that December 26th gets here soon. Because maybe the hope and the joy that you had is a distant memory. Maybe it's because of an empty seat that will be at the table this year. Maybe it's because you don't have the resources to be able to provide the kind of holiday that you want for all of your family and friends. But for some reason, the hope, the joy, the dream that you once had has faded away. Reginald Fessenbender had great hopes and dreams. And by all accounts, by the time he was 33, he had achieved more in his life than many people ever would. At 33 years old, he was already a tenured professor at Purdue University. He'd spent almost a decade of his life as the chief engineer for Thomas Edison. But he had a falling out with Edison and left his work. His name and his reputation was scarred, and he found himself working alone on a project that no one believed in. He spent years pouring his time, his energy, and his resources into this idea that he could combine radio frequencies and that the radio waves could be used for more than just Morse code. He'd spent his entire life savings on patents that had been rejected and taken back. But on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1906, he and his wife went to a lighthouse in Plymouth, Massachusetts. A few days earlier, they'd sent out a telegram to every ship captain on the eastern coast and throughout the world to turn their Morse code radios at precisely 9 p.m. on December 24th to a certain frequency in a special holiday gift for all of them. A storm came in that was unlike any storm that the sea had ever produced on the eastern coast. But Reginald and his wife climbed the stairs of that light tower, surrounded by nothing but wires and candles. He tried putting together the frequencies and the cables of his new invention that he called a microphone. And at 9:01 p.m., 1 minute late, as sailors and seamen gathered around little radios on their ships the world over, a crackling began to form. And for the first time in human history, words were heard over the radio waves. And the first words that Reginald Fessenbender said, that spread out throughout the world from that lighthouse in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And lo, there in the field were shepherds watching their flocks by night. When suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were afraid. Do not be afraid, said the angel, for we bring you good tidings of great joy that shall be for all people. For unto you on this day in the city of David a Savior has been born, Christ the Lord. And you will find him lying in a manger and wrapped in swaddling clothes. Let this be a sign unto you. And then the angel was joined by a great host of angels who sang in worship, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace and goodwill toward men. Reginald turned around and his wife handed him his violin. She stepped to the microphone and Reginald began to play. And the very first song that was ever played on radio waves in human history at 9:06 p.m. on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1906. And oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Would you sing it with us? Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. The thrill of hope, a weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angel voices, oh, night divine, oh, night when Christ was born, oh, night divine, oh, night divine. And truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. Sweet hymns of joy in grateful chorus raise we, let all within us praise his holy name. Christ is the Lord. Oh, praise his name forever. His power and glory, yeah, for more proclaim his power and glory, yeah, for more proclaim. And this new thing that would change the entire course of human history with the message of hope was because of a new thing centuries earlier that would proclaim the message of hope, and the world would never be the same. So our hope to you, our hope for you tonight and tomorrow night and each night going forward is that this holiday season and moving on, that you will continually have a sense of hope, of joy, of peace, and of love, and that your heart will be forever filled with the thrill of hope. Thank you so much for coming tonight.